July 25, 1944, 0445 hours. The camp still holds night in its corners when the whistle cuts the dark. Karl Muller rolls from the bunk, boots hitting the floor with a soft double thud. Across the aisle, Feldwebel Franz Weber ties his laces with quick, neat movements, the leather squeaking faintly. In the yard, a GMCCCKW deuce and a half idles low. Exhaust blooming white in the cool. A corporal checks names against a clipboard, pencil nub tucked behind his ear. Farm detail. Load up, he calls, voice wrapped in steam and mourning. Sergeant Ramirez moves through the half-light, coffee tin in one hand, the other settling his web belt where the .45 rides easy. Hats, canteens, gloves if you drew 'em, he says, not loud, not soft. Mind the fence when you cue. He taps two men on shoulders, counts another group by twos, and looks up as Karl and Weber climb onto the wooden benches bolted along the truck bed. The slats are cold to the touch. A Red Cross man trots up with a canvas satchel and hands the corporal a stack of small cards stamped with a red emblem. Shits, the corporal explains in German, fanning them like flimsy playing cards. Will be issued at day's end. For the canteen, he pats his pocket, where a rubber coin purse bulges. Ice cream, maybe. The truck lurches out the gate with a pop of the clutch. Wire slides by. Then the world opens into a quilt of fields laid green and gold under a sky taking on color by cautious degrees. Cornrows march in perfect files. A windmill turns with a click, 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 an old metronome kept honest by the prairie. In the cab, the driver, Private Sloan, freckles bridged across his nose like splattered paint, balances the wheel with one palm and hums to himself. A Springfield rides in a rack under the dash, oiled and asleep. They pass a farmhouse where a woman in a dress the color of faded cornflowers stands with her elbows on the porch rail, watching the convoy the way she might watch a new weather system roll in. Children in bare feet bang a screen door and wave both hands. One boy pantomimes a throw. And the truck bed answers with an embarrassed ripple of laughter. Sloan lifts two fingers from the wheel in a lazy salute. He downshifts at a field gate and noses the truck into a lane flanked by cornstalks tall as men. Listen up, Ramirez says as boots thump to dirt. You pick when told. You stack when told. Don't wander. Water breaks on the hour. He gestures with his chin toward a lean farmer in denim and a straw hat. A man built of sinew and weather. Mr. Halvorsen runs this spread. He'll show the rows. You treat his ground like a church. Halvorsen nods once, blue eyes pale and polite as well water. He speaks a clean Midwestern English that cuts through accents like a plow through loam. Mornin', we'll start you on the north quarter. Sweet corn wants pulling clean. Twist, not yank. Leave leaves where they are. He pantomimes the motion. A smooth wrist turn. You fellas'll get it. They get it. At first the hands blunder, the corn tears. The rhythm slips, but then bodies remember they were built to work. Weber finds the angle that saves his wrist. Karl counts by tens, a habit from machine shops, and ties bundles with baler twine that catches his fingers and leaves straw kisses on his skin. The sun shoulders up and leans. Sweat darkens collars. A GI named Baxter, forearms corded like bridge cables, runs the flatbed up the rows, stacking ears in a pyramid as tidy as cordwood. He offers a canteen around. The aluminum beat up and cool against the lip. Short pull, long pull, Baxter says, demonstrating. Share and nobody keels over. At 0900 a Red Cross car rattles in and a man hops out with a camera the size of a loaf of bread. He frames the field. Prisoners and guards dotting the rows like notes on a staff. The shutter clacks. Inspection report, he says to nobody in particular. His German careful. Working conditions, good. He writes with a propelling pencil that clicks with each word. Beside him, the chaplain shades his eyes. Hands a prisoner a handkerchief. Tucks it into his pocket when the man demurs. Drink, he says gently. The one word in German he pronounces without schoolboy edges. Halvorsen walks the line, checking bundles, straightening a stack with a wrist flick that speaks of decades. He pauses beside Karl and plucks an ear, peels back the silk, and pins a kernel with a thumbnail. Milk beads on the yellow like a held breath. Just right, he says. then gestures toward a shaded wagon where his wife has set out a pump jug and a plate of cookies that smell of cinnamon and something else that is simply home. Weber hesitates half a beat, then takes one, bites, and his face does a small, astonished thing he quickly puts away. By midday the truck bed is a bright hill of corn and the air is sweet with green sap. Ramirez checks his wristwatch, an Elgin with minute marks nicked from years of sergeant time. 10 more and we break, he calls. On the last row a stalk slaps Karl's cheek and leaves a line of damp across his skin. He doesn't mind. The work has rhythm now. And the rhythm is a rope you can hold when the mind starts to slip toward places with barbed wire and men with hard eyes. He twists, stacks, ties, breathes. The 4-beat measure of a symphony that lifts quietly and carries. Lunch is sandwiches wrapped in wax paper and a vat of lemonade that tastes faintly of aluminum and sun. Delaney appears like a conjurer, catching a ride with Baxter on the flatbed, and squats on his heels to eat, maskless and grinning. "You boys swing better than you pick," he says, and passes Karl a folded page torn from a magazine. On it, an advertisement shows a tall glass gathered in beads of condensation. A fizz caught by the camera in mid-burst. "Canteen got a shipment," Delaney says, "warm by the time it hits your hand. But it's the taste that matters." Work resumes quieter, words fraying in the heat. Halvorsen's dog, a black and white creature who has opinions about crows, patrols the fence line and huffs when they step too close to his idea of order. The sun moves, shadows shorten and then begin to lengthen like the exhale after a held note. Baxter jumps to the ground, wipes his neck with a tendon-mapped hand, and claps dust from his palms. "Good pull," he says, "real good." He digs into a pouch and drops cardboard chits into a corporal's hat one by one. The soft papery sound like dealing cards. The corporal hands them out along the truck bed. Karl turns his between finger and thumb. 10 cents, 10 cents, 10 cents, small rectangles of permission. The ride back is all wind and the rustle of paper currency that isn't currency at all. The camp rears up, familiar as a map now, the gate, the towers, the bell. Inside, the canteen's screen door sings a springy note. A line forms. Behind the counter, a private with a pencil mustache moves quick, tallying on a slate. Bottles clink. A freezer unit, noisy as a generator, breathes out a chill that makes forearms pebble. The first spoon of vanilla ice cream goes brittle cold against Karl's teeth. And the sweetness blooms like a memory from a childhood that never actually had it. Weber takes his bottle. It hisses when he cranks the cap with a church key, and tips it back. The fizz climbs his sinuses and he coughs. Surprised, then laughs. A short bark he can't stop. At 1900 the theater calls again. Eddie the projectionist, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hair pasted to his forehead by heat and effort, waves Weber into the booth. "Here," Eddie says, pressing a splicer into his hand. Films torn near the sprockets. "Diagonal splice. Don't overdo the cement or she'll stick." He points at the path the celluloid takes through rollers and guides. The projector, a Simplex with a lamphouse that glows like a coal stove, purrs. And the belt hums its low B-flat. In the dark between frames, the booth smells of hot phenolic and grease pencil. Weber's hands move steady and precise, machinery and patience having lived in them long before he carried a rifle. Ramirez leans against the doorway, a shape cut from the half-light, and watches the German's fingers find the rhythm of a craft. He glances down through the booth window at the room, filling now. Americans and Germans settling with cups of lemonade in the last damp heat of the day clinging to their collars. The screen flares to life, and dust dances in the beam. Someone in back coughs. Someone else murmurs the first line of dialogue along with the actor. Like a liturgy, Ramirez smiles, just for himself, and checks his watch. 2,000 hours on the nose. Outside, the diamond holds the ghost of lines. Pale against the dirt, a glove lies on the bench. Forgotten, its pocket still shaped to a ball. In the mess, dishwater runs gray and warm. On the far fence a meadowlark tries out the same 6 notes it always sings. Certain that if it gets them right, something important will arrive. July 28, 1944. The sky over Camp Algona wakes the color of a tin cup. and a breeze presses the flag flat to the pole before letting it breathe again. A bugle lifts reveille into the rafters. The note rattles dust from the beams. In Barrack 7B, boots scrape the floor. Belts whisper through loops. Men fold blankets with a precision that makes the bunks look like rows of bread loaves. Through the open window, the diamond lies combed and pale. A fresh layer of chalk, a white seam against the red dirt. Inspection. Someone says, just the word, and conversation thins. Karl Muller buttons his tunic collar and slips the postcard to his mother into his breast pocket, still unsent. Still carrying the careful lines about health and weather and odd things like movies and baseball that he cannot quite bring himself to commit to paper. Feldwebel Franz Weber pulls his cap brim low. He has oiled the hinges of the barrack door with a dab of machine grease pilfered from the projector booth. The door swings without a squeak. A small victory in a day that will count small victories. At 0800 the Red Cross sedan noses into the yard like a gray beetle. The mustached delegate, Schneider, unfolds, neat as a razor case, and consults a ledger thick enough to stop a bullet. Beside him strides Captain Harold C. Morrow, the camp commandant, tunic pressed, Sam Brown belt polished to a clean sheen. The brass of his Colt's magazine catch bright as a fingernail when the sun catches it. Sergeant Ramirez ghosts 2 paces behind and to the right, the place where a sergeant belongs when an officer walks the line. Mess first, Morrow says. His voice is the clean click of a bolt closing. Inside the mess hall, steam lifts from vats like breath on a cold morning. PFC Torres stirs oatmeal with a paddle big enough to pull a boat. Trays slide, tin on tin. A farmyard chorus, and coffee scent shakes sleep from faces. Schneider watches a prisoner receive the same scoop as a guard and marks his ledger. The nib of his pen whispering. He looks up, German formal and even. You are satisfied? He asks a man in gray. The prisoner blinks, then nods. Yeah, he says. It is hot. They move on. Infirmary, iodine. Bandages stacked like books. Chapel, plain benches. A hymn number board with digits that hear both Lutheran and Baptist in the same key. Library, dog-eared paperbacks. German classics. A crate of magazines whose covers smell of ink and women smiling with red mouths. Schneider pauses longest at the bulletin board. The week's schedule sits under thumbtacks. Movie nights. Farm details. Worship times. League standings for the camp's baseball teams. He copies the standings with a small contented hum. 7B7D Verein 2-0. At the diamond, 2 teams stretch. Delaney warms his shoulder with easy circles. The white laces of the baseball stitching a small orbit in the air. Karl jogs the baseline. Calves nicked by grass blades. Breath fogging and then vanishing in the sun that's already taking hold. Ramirez checks the chalk, scuffs it with his boot. Satisfied, he looks up and finds Schneider watching him. The Red Cross man taps the diamond with his pen. This, he says in accented English. This makes men manageable. He searches for a better word and lands on one that isn't quite right but is honest. Human. The newspaper kid from town, skinny and with a cap too big for his head, pedals through the gate on a balloon tire bicycle. The guard waving him through with a waggle of fingers. He brings papers wrapped in twine and a carton of film reels under his arm. An American flag pin stuck to his suspenders. He trades headlines to a GI for a pack of Lucky Strikes and eyes the Germans with uncomplicated curiosity. You boys hit any homers yet? He asks, and is delighted when he gets a hand signal, 2 fingers raised, from Hans Richter at second, 2 over the fence. Both yesterday. The day's rhythm falters just after noon. A work detail returning early from a tin shed repair job in town clatters through the gate looking ruffled. One man bleeding from a cut on the forehead shaped like the corner of a brick. Rage still hot in the air like a pan left on a burner. They say a farmer's son threw a stone from the road and shouted a name that had too many knives in it. Private Sloan's face is tight on the wheel. The GI riding shotgun holds his jaw as if a tooth aches, nothing serious. Just the way a body remembers being braced. Morrow arrives fast. Ramirez is already there. Posture a wall that keeps the rush of voices from turning into a flood. The wounded prisoner sits on the tailgate, blood streaking the bridge of his nose. The chaplain moves in with a handkerchief, the cloth blooming pink. The infirmary corporal follows with iodine and a butterfly bandage. Schneider watches, ledger open, and waits for the thing that will define this camp, how it answers a break in the world's civility. Morrow's voice is mild, almost bored. Names, he says. He listens without interrupting, eyes half-lidded like a man memorizing coordinates. He turns to Ramirez. You will have the civilian police in town take a statement. Send chuckling Charlie. A deputy with a grin that never reaches his eyes, with 2 men. I want to hear a mea culpa by supper. He pivots to the prisoners. German emerging like a well-worn tool, clean, adequate. Ihr Sicherheit ist unsere Verantwortung. Wir werden das klären. Your safety is our responsibility. We will set this right. The words land. Some faces ease, others do not. Not yet. Weber's mouth is a thin wire. Karl lets the breath he was holding leak out slowly. The day knits back together. On the diamond, the game resumes with an extra layer of careful. Richter turns a pivot as crisp as shaved ice. Delaney blocks the plate with a catcher's nonchalant cruelty that still leaves the runner's ribs untouched. Between innings, Ramirez takes a call at the guardhouse, one black Bakelite handset. The cord coiling like a snake, and returns with a burr of satisfaction under his words. Town cop says they got our boy and the kid with the good arm. He tells Morrow. Father says he'll make it right. Morrow nods once. Good, he says. Make sure the wound is documented. Send a letter to the company about restraint and responsibility. He looks at Schneider, who has already written the word, resolved, in a hand so neat it scarcely believes in anger. Evening lays a gold sheet over the camp. In the theater, Eddie turns the crank on a rewinder. Film whispering like a river through his fingers. Weber slides a splice into place and presses it with the flat of his thumb. Perfect, Eddie says. You got hands like a watchmaker. Weber glances through the booth glass at the room. The projector beam cuts the dust. The room is full. On screen, another Western tenses toward violence that will end with a fixed moral geometry. Off screen, the day's violence has also been measured, weighed, checked back into its box. Karl sits 2 rows from the front, the half-empty bottle of cola sweating against his knee. He has finally written the line on the postcard and tucked it into the outgoing box at the chaplain's office. I am healthy. I work on a farm. There is a cinema. It is absurd on the page and true in his mouth. He leans back and lets the screen wash the dust from his mind. In the aisle, Ramirez stands at parade rest, thumbs hooked just inside his belt. The posture of a man who knows his presence is the rulebook written in bone. After the credits, a hush lingers, the unguarded moment people forget they were sharing until it's gone. As the benches creak and the audience rises, Schneider steps to the front and, in German, thanks the commandant and the prisoners for their cooperation. This camp, he says, is as the conventions intend. He pauses, considering, then adds a sentence that is not in any manual. It is also decent. The word lands heavier than it looks. Lights up. Outside, the diamond holds the day's footprints like a palimpsest. The guard in the tower smokes, ember winking red as a firefly. Somewhere, a harmonica tries a tune it cannot finish. In Barrack 7B, Karl folds his postcard thoughtlessly, then rescues it, smoothing it flat. Weber unlaces his boots and sits a long time before he speaks. Vielleicht, he says into the dim, as if testing the weight of the idea on his tongue. Vielleicht verlieren wir hier nicht alles. Perhaps we do not lose everything here. The night breathes, and for once it is not an answer but an agreement.